The aroma of freshly ground coffee hung in the air, a familiar and comforting promise of the day to come. In a sunlit kitchen, the ritual was always the same: a careful pour of rich, dark olive oil over a salad of vibrant greens, a drizzle of golden honey into a cup of herbal tea. These were the small, conscious choices we made, the tiny flags of identity we planted in the soil of our daily lives. We believed in the labels, in the glossy promises of purity and health that lined the supermarket shelves. We trusted that what we saw was what we got, that the deep green of the oil meant it was pressed from ripe olives under a Mediterranean sun, that the amber thickness of the honey was the condensed labor of 1,000 bees. It was a comfortable faith, this belief in the authenticity of our pantries, but the truth, as it so often does, lay just beneath the surface, a hidden landscape of shadows and substitutions. Beyond the gleaming aisles and the cheerful packaging, a vast and intricate dance of deception was underway. It was a global masquerade where taste could be synthesized, color artificially mimicked, and origin stories fabricated with the cold precision of a chemist's formula. The pursuit of profit had spawned a phantom world of food, a parallel universe where nothing was quite as it seemed. The olive oil might be cut with cheap seed oils, its vibrant flavor a chemical illusion. That jar of honey could be little more than flavored corn syrup, a sweet lie in a bear-shaped bottle. Even the pepper in the mill might be adulterated with papaya seeds, a silent theft of pungency. This was not merely a matter of disappointing flavor or wasted money. It was a fundamental breach of trust, a manipulation of one of our most basic human connections, our relationship with what we eat. Every meal, every snack, became a potential question mark. Were we nourishing our bodies or simply ingesting a clever forgery? The very act of eating, once a source of simple pleasure and sustenance, was now laced with a subtle, nagging doubt. We lived in an age of unparalleled connection and information, yet we were increasingly disconnected from the genuine nature of our food. This was the silent story of our modern tables, a tale not of culinary innovation, but of ingenious fakery, where the most coveted flavors and rarest ingredients had their cunning, inexpensive doppelgangers waiting in the wings. The stage for this grand deception was set by a simple, powerful force: desire. Human craving for the unique, the luxurious, and the convenient created a market ripe for imitation. We yearned for the earthy, complex punch of a white truffle shaved over pasta, but balked at its astronomical price. We wanted the creamy, indulgent spread of butter without the guilt of dairy fat. We sought the health halo of superfoods like acai and goji berries, eager for a shortcut to vitality. Our palates, trained by a world of intense, engineered flavors, came to expect a certain potency, a blast of vanilla, a kick of cinnamon, a perfect, consistent sweetness. Authenticity, with its nuances, imperfections, and seasonal variations, often struggled to compete with the bold, reliable, and cheap copy, and so, an entire industry rose to meet these desires, not by painstaking cultivation, but by clever replication. In laboratories and factories far from olive groves and vanilla orchards, scientists and food engineers became the uncelebrated chefs of our time. They learned to break down flavors into their molecular components, to rebuild them from cheaper materials. They mastered the art of texture, using starches and gums to mimic the flake of crab meat or the melt of chocolate. Color was no obstacle: a dash of carotenoids could turn margarine buttery yellow, a hint of chlorophyll could make processed paste seem like verdant pesto. The goal was not to create something new, but to create something convincingly old, to bottle the ghost of a flavor and sell it for a fraction of the cost of summoning the real thing. This was the alchemy of the modern age, turning syrup into honey, sawdust into parmesan, and petroleum into vanilla extract. The story of fake food, however, is curiously intertwined with the story of some of our most beloved genuine inventions. For within this shadowy world of imitation, there exists a brighter, parallel history, one of pure, delicious accident. Many of the staples we now consider authentic, the cornerstones of national cuisines and childhood memories, were not born from meticulous planning, but from kitchen mishaps, moments of scarcity, and pure, unadulterated serendipity. It is a delicious irony that while we are sold carefully crafted fakes, some of our truest culinary icons emerged from chaos, consider the humble chocolate chip cookie, a paragon of American comfort food. Its origin lies not in a master pastry chef's blueprint, but in a moment of lack. In a small Massachusetts inn during the lean years of the Great Depression, a resourceful woman named Ruth found herself without the baker's chocolate she needed for her butter drop cookies. Undeterred, she reached for what she had, a bar of semi-sweet chocolate. Chopping it into uneven chunks, she assumed they would melt and disperse into the dough, creating a uniform chocolate cookie. They did not. Instead, the heat of the oven softened the fragments into gooey, distinct pockets of molten sweetness, suspended in a cradle of vanilla-scented dough. The result was a happy rebellion against uniformity, a textural surprise that delighted her guests. Ruth's accidental creation was a testament to improvisation, a small triumph of making do that resonated so deeply it became etched into the fabric of a nation's palate. She didn't just stumble upon a new recipe, she discovered a new form of joy. Far from that cozy toll-house kitchen, another accident was bubbling away, quite literally, in the cold, damp cellars of a French monastery. A monk named Pierre, charged with the sacred duty of producing still wine for the abbey's table, faced a perennial problem. The frigid winters of the Champagne region would halt the fermentation in his bottles prematurely. When spring's warmth returned, the dormant yeasts would reawaken inside their sealed glass prisons, producing a fizz of carbon dioxide with nowhere to escape. The result was a cellar fraught with tension, both figurative and literal. Bottles would explode with gunshot reports, sending shards of glass and foaming wine across the stone floors. It was a vintner's nightmare, a costly, dangerous mess. Yet, when Pierre dared to taste the surviving, bubbly liquid from a bottle that had somehow held its cork, he encountered not failure, but revelation. The wine was alive with a delicate, prickling energy, a celebration in a glass. What was once a flaw was transformed, through perspective and courage, into a virtue. That monastic mistake, refined over centuries, became synonymous with luxury and triumph, a liquid embodiment of the idea that pressure and disruption could create something extraordinarily beautiful. These stories of accidental genesis are not confined to desserts or drinks. They extend to the very snacks we crunch mindlessly. In an upstate New York resort kitchen in the mid-1800s, a chef named George faced the ire of a patron who found his fried potatoes too thick, too soggy, altogether unsatisfactory. Sent back to the kitchen time and again, George's frustration simmered until it reached a boiling point. In a fit of pique, he took a potato and sliced it impossibly thin, so thin it was nearly translucent, before tossing the wispy shavings into scorching oil. He intended them as a final, sarcastic gesture, a crisp, brittle insult. To his astonishment, the customer adored them. The paper-thin slices fried into delicate, golden wafers, salty and addictively crisp. The potato chip was born not from creativity, but from annoyance, a culinary retort that became a global obsession. Similarly, the cheerful, puffed cheese curl owes its existence to animal feed. A worker in a Wisconsin mill, cleaning a machine used to process moistened grain for livestock, found that the heat of the gears caused the corn mixture to puff into strange, airy shapes. Curious, he took some home, seasoned them, and discovered a strangely compelling new snack. What was meant for horses became, with a sprinkle of powdered cheese, a treat for humans. These narratives stand in stark contrast to the calculated deception of food fraud. One is a story of human fallibility leading to unexpected wonder, the other is a story of human greed leading to deliberate deceit. The chocolate chip, the sparkling wine, the potato chip, they are all gifts of honesty, born from real circumstances and shared with genuine intent. They remind us that authenticity is often messy, unplanned, and deeply human. Yet, as these true icons solidified their places in our hearts and lunchboxes, a different kind of innovation was taking root in the basements and backrooms of the food industry, one aimed not at creating something new and wonderful by chance, but at replicating something expensive and desired through cunning. The age of the perfect fake was dawning, and it began with the simplest, most universal of cravings, sweetness. The quest for sweetness is a primal human drive, one that has shaped empires, spurred exploration, and fueled both ingenuity and deceit. Long before the rise of high-fructose corn syrup, the story of our desire for sugar took a strange and transformative turn in a Baltimore laboratory. It was the late 1870s, and a chemist named Felix was deeply immersed in the study of coal tar derivatives, a field far removed from the culinary arts. One evening, after a long day of work, he noticed a peculiar, cloying taste on his fingers. He had washed his hands, yet the sweet flavor persisted. It was on his skin, on his lips. Puzzled, he retraced his steps, tasting the various compounds on his lab bench until he isolated the source, a splash of benzoic sulfamide. In that moment, Felix understood he had stumbled upon something monumental. Here was sweetness without substance, a sugary phantom conjured from the heart of industrial chemistry. He named it saccharin. Felix's discovery sparked a bitter feud with his research partner, who claimed rightful credit for the work, but Felix was relentless. He saw not just a scientific curiosity, but a commercial revolution. He patented the compound and began production just as global sugar prices began to fluctuate wildly. When the First World War constricted sugar supplies, saccharin found its purpose. It was the sweetener of necessity, a wartime ration that promised pleasure without the calories or the cost. Later, as the mid-century obsession with slim waistlines and diet foods took hold, saccharin and its artificial descendants, cyclamates, aspartame, sucralose, became the guardians of guilt-free indulgence. They were miracles of modern science, allowing cakes to be sweet, sodas to be fizzy, and lives to be, ostensibly, unchanged, all while banishing sugar's caloric consequences. The food industry embraced them wholeheartedly, and a new era was born, one where sweetness could be divorced entirely from its natural source, becoming a modular component, a chemical note to be added at will. This chemical uncoupling of flavor from food created a philosophical rift in our relationship with eating. If the sweet taste of a strawberry could be isolated, analyzed, and reconstructed in a lab, then what was flavor, really? Was it the essence of a thing, or merely a sensory signal that could be hijacked? The success of artificial sweeteners proved it was the latter, and this principle soon bled into every corner of the grocery store. Vanilla, the complex, floral seed pod of a delicate orchid, was one of the first and most profound victims. True vanilla is a marvel of labor-intensive agriculture, requiring hand pollination and years of careful curing. Its flavor profile is a symphony of hundreds of compounds, evoking cream, wood, and faint wisps of tobacco. The imitation version, in contrast, is primarily built on a single compound, vanillin, which can be synthesized from wood pulp or, more commonly, from petrochemicals. To the average palate accustomed to the blunt force of artificial flavors, the synthetic version often reads as more vanilla, a stronger, simpler, and cheaper blast of that recognizable note. Thus, over 90% of the vanilla flavoring consumed in the world is a fossil fuel ghost, a pale imitation that has, through ubiquity and power, become the standard. The real, nuanced bean became a rarity, a luxury item for connoisseurs, while its chemical shadow sat in every bottle of extract and gallon of ice cream, the same pattern repeated with spices, the very soul of many cuisines. True saffron, the crimson stigma of the Crocus sativus flower, is worth more than its weight in gold, each thread painstakingly plucked by hand. Its flavor is haunting, earthy, and subtly metallic, and it lends a luminous golden hue to dishes. Adulterators, however, found endless ways to mimic it. Saffron was cut with safflower petals, dyed corn silks, or even shredded marigold. A simple glass of water could reveal the fraud. Genuine saffron would slowly weep its gold, while fakes would bleed an instant, garish red. Cinnamon, too, had its impostor. The prized, delicate Ceylon cinnamon, with its smooth, layered quills and sweet complexity, was routinely replaced with the more common and cheaper cassia cinnamon. Cassia is stronger, harsher, and contains high levels of coumarin, a compound that can be toxic in large doses. To the untrained eye and palate, it was just cinnamon, but the difference between them was the difference between a finely tuned instrument and a blaring horn. This great flavor forgery was not born out of a desire to create new experiences, but to satisfy old cravings at a lower cost. It was economics dressed in the garb of taste. By mastering the sensory triggers, sweet, salty, savory, creamy, the food industry could build entire worlds of edible fiction. They could create a strawberry yogurt that had never touched a berry, a butter-flavored popcorn that was oil-drenched and artificially colored, a maple syrup that was corn syrup and caramel coloring. The grocery store became a gallery of plausible illusions, each product a carefully crafted story where the ingredients list, written in tiny, cryptic print, told the real, far less appetizing tale. The stage was now set for this deception to move beyond mere flavorings and into the very substance of the food itself, from what it tasted like to what it actually was. The deception, having mastered the art of taste, soon set its sights on substance. Why merely mimic a flavor when you could replicate an entire ingredient, and in doing so, unlock staggering profits? This shift moved fakery from the realm of seasoning to the core of the meal, transforming whole foods into clever, convincing simulations. The seafood counter, with its glistening, ice-bedded offerings, became a prime theater for this sophisticated sleight of hand. Here, the fraud was not a matter of added flavor, but of wholesale identity theft. A consumer would pay a premium for wild-caught Alaskan salmon, attracted to its deep coral hue and promise of omega-3 fatty acids. What they might receive, however, was a cheaper, farm-raised species dyed with astaxanthin to achieve that same rosy color. The delicate, sweet meat of scallops was a particular target. Perfect, uniform rounds of scallop could be stamped from the flesh of cheaper fish like skate or shark, their texture and flavor engineered with phosphates and additives. The most brazen operations used a processed paste of white fish, molded into that familiar cylindrical shape, creating a seafood ghost with no connection to the ocean floor at all. Crab meat followed a similar, legally gray path. The crab stick, a staple of cheap sushi rolls and salads, was a Japanese invention of genius, a purely fabricated seafood product made from pulverized white fish, often pollock, starches, egg whites, and sugar, flavored and colored to vaguely resemble the sweet shreds of king or snow crab. It was a triumph of food engineering, so successful that it created its own category, but it was routinely passed off as the real thing in seafood salads, dips, and stuffings, its telltale, too perfect shreds hiding behind mayonnaise and celery. The economic motive was irresistible, turning a few cents of processed fish paste into a product that could be sold at crab meat prices. For the average person, distracted by a creamy sauce or a layer of melted cheese, the difference was imperceptible. The ocean's bounty had been democratized through imitation, but at the cost of transparency. This bait dance which extended to the land as well, reaching its zenith with one of the world's most coveted luxuries, the truffle. The real tuber, hunted by dogs and pigs in specific European forests, was a rare, fugitive delicacy, its pungent, intoxicating aroma fading within days of being unearthed. Its price reflected this scarcity, often climbing into the thousands per pound. The truffle oil that flavored countless restaurant dishes, however, told a different story. Most commercial truffle oils contained no truffle whatsoever. Instead, they were a base of olive or grapeseed oil infused with 2,4-dithiapentane, a single aromatic compound isolated from truffles, or, more cheaply, synthesized in a lab. This chemical provided one loud, blunt note of that famous funk, but none of the complexity, the earthiness, the subtlety of the real fungus. It was a fragrant lie in a bottle, a way for chefs to add a whiff of luxury to a $15 plate of fries without ever touching the real thing. The diner, smelling that powerful aroma, believed they were experiencing a taste of rarity, while in reality, they were experiencing a taste of industrial chemistry. Perhaps the most pervasive and emotionally resonant of these substance fakes was honey. The product of the hive symbolized natural purity, the slow alchemy of flower nectar transformed by bees. But the global demand far outstripped what bees could naturally produce, and honey's thick, simple consistency was easy to mimic. Unscrupulous producers would feed bees high-fructose corn syrup instead of letting them forage, resulting in a honey that was nutritionally hollow. Others bypassed the bees entirely, creating a slurry of corn syrup, sugar, water, and a dash of real honey for flavor, perhaps thickened with maltodextrin. This honey would pass the squeeze bottle test. It would be sweet, it would have a golden color, but it was a corpse of the real thing, devoid of the pollens, enzymes, and antioxidants that made genuine honey a living food. A simple test with a drop of water could reveal the truth. Pure honey would hold its form, a dense bead sinking slowly to the bottom of a glass, while the adulterated product would dissolve or leave a cloudy trail. The tragedy was that this flood of fake honey drove down prices, making it nearly impossible for honest beekeepers to compete, and further obscuring the real from the replica in a marketplace where price was often the only guide. The fraud had become architectural. It was no longer just about painting a false flavor onto a neutral canvas, it was about constructing the canvas itself from cheaper, inferior materials. The consumer's senses were under a coordinated assault, the eyes deceived by color, the nose by isolated aromatics, the palate by engineered textures. One could now sit down to a meal of truffle-kissed pasta with a side of crab salad, drizzled with honey mustard dressing, and drink a vanilla cream soda, all while believing in a gustatory experience that was, in substance, almost entirely fictional. The table had been set with ghosts. But this world of imitation did not exist in a vacuum. Alongside it, pulsing with a different kind of energy, was the parallel universe of processed food, a realm where the question wasn't, is this real, but rather, what is this? The final, and perhaps most profound, layer of this story exists not in the clever forgeries of luxury items, but in the bright, hyperpalatable heart of the processed food aisle. Here, the goal was not imitation, but invention, the creation of entirely new edible substances that bypassed nature altogether. These were the foods that had no authentic counterpart to copy, because they were born in the laboratory and the factory, designed not by culinary tradition, but by food science, marketing, and the precise mechanics of human craving. This was the kingdom of the Twinkie, the cheese puff, the neon-pink bubblegum, the rainbow-colored cereal marshmallow. These creations were built from components, modified starches, hydrogenated oils, protein isolates, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and a symphony of artificial flavors and colors. They were marvels of engineering, achieving textures that were impossibly light, airy, or melt-away creamy, sensations unknown to the natural world. Their flavors were singular and potent: blue raspberry, butter rum, birthday cake. They were designed for maximum mouthfeel and bliss point, that perfect intersection of sugar, fat, and salt that triggered a neurological cascade of desire, making it difficult to stop eating. They were shelf-stable for years, their components so divorced from anything perishable that mold and bacteria found no purchase. A Twinkie was less a pastry and more of an edible monument to chemical preservation, a paradox of being both food and something that resisted all natural processes of decay. This world thrived on its own accidental origins, much like the genuine classics, but with a distinctly industrial twist. Bubble gum was invented when an accountant at a chewing gum company, tinkering with recipes to make a less sticky product, accidentally created a stretchy, pink batch that was perfect for blowing bubbles. The cheese puff was born from a machine meant to process moistened animal feed, where corn mush puffed unexpectedly under heat. Dip N. Dots, the ice cream of the future, emerged from a microbiologist's experiments in cryogenics. These were not accidents of a home kitchen, but industrial serendipity, where the machinery of mass production itself coughed up new forms of snack food, and alongside these purely invented entities existed the improved versions of real food, the products that promised health, convenience, or moral superiority. The dairy aisle now held a dizzying array of milks pressed from almonds, oats, soy, and peas, often fortified with vitamins and calcium to match cow's milk's nutritional profile. Plant-based butters and cheeses aimed to replicate the creamy, fatty, umami sensations of their dairy ancestors using coconut oil, potato starch, and nutritional yeast. Lab-grown meat promised the taste and texture of a burger without the slaughter. These were not fakes in the deceptive sense, they were openly alternatives, but their entire reason for being was to simulate an experience born from animal products. They existed in a fascinating space between honest substitution and high-tech imitation, challenging the very definition of what made a food real. Was reality rooted in origin, or in sensory experience? The ultimate consequence of living in this layered food landscape with its artful forgeries, its invented hyperfoods, and its tech-driven alternatives, was a deep, cultural confusion. The American palate, in particular, became a subject of global bewilderment. To visitors, the bread was suspiciously sweet and soft, lasting for weeks without staling. The chocolate tasted waxy and overly sugary compared to the deeper, more bitter European varieties. The sheer, exuberant excess was baffling: deep-fried sticks of butter at state fairs, salads made of candy and marshmallows, cheese that came from a pressurized can. The classic peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a staple of childhood, seemed a bizarre combination to many abroad. Root beer was said to taste like medicine. The iconic yellow cheese slice, a pasteurized prepared cheese product, was a symbol of this engineered reality. It melted perfectly, it had a mild, creamy taste, but it was a substance entirely of its own making, a plastic-wrapped icon of culinary invention. This confusion highlighted the great divergence. The food culture had split into two powerful streams. One was a globalized, shadow economy of deception, where the value of authenticity was constantly under siege by cheaper, convincing copies. The other was a booming, fluorescent-lit empire of invention, where food was freed from the constraints of biology and season, becoming a customizable, durable, and powerfully addictive product. In the first, we were lied to about what we ate. In the second, we were offered something arguably stranger: foods that were honest about their artificiality, yet so successfully engineered that they became beloved in their own right. The story of our plates, therefore, is not a simple parable of good, real food versus bad, fake food. It is a complex tapestry woven from threads of accident and design, of scarcity and abundance, of honest longing and dishonest gain. It is the story of the chocolate chip cookie born from a lack of ingredients, and the vanilla flavor born from a petroleum derivative. It is the story of champagne bubbling from exploded bottles in a monk's cellar, and cheese puffs puffing from an animal feed machine. We live with both legacies. We navigate a world where we must learn to read the tiny print, to question the too good deal, to appreciate the subtle complexity of the real, while also acknowledging the bizarre, comfort food joy of the invented. Our hunger shaped this world, and in return, this world reshaped our hunger, teaching us to crave both the honest taste of a sun-ripened tomato and the perfect, crunchy, neon-orange cheese curl. The true challenge of the modern eater lies not in choosing one over the other, but in understanding the profound and peculiar stories hidden in every single bite.